Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, in a quiet little village, there lived a cheerful young girl who always wore a bright red hooded cloak. Because of this, everyone simply called her Little Red Riding Hood. One sunny morning, her mother packed a small basket with fresh bread, sweet honey, and ripe fruit. She handed it to her daughter and said gently, "Your grandmother is feeling a little unwell today. Please take this basket to her. And remember, go straight there. Don't wander off the path." Little Red Riding Hood nodded with a bright smile. "Don't worry, Mother. I'll be careful." And with that, she skipped out of the cottage and headed into the forest. The air was fresh, birds were singing, and the path ahead seemed safe. But she wasn't alone. A sly wolf had been watching from behind the trees. He stepped out onto the path and gave his most polite smile. "Good morning, young lady. Where are you off to on such a fine day?" Little Red Riding Hood, thinking he was just another traveler, answered honestly, "I'm going to visit my grandmother, who lives at the edge of the forest. She's not feeling well, so I'm bringing her some food." The wolf's eyes gleamed. "How thoughtful of you. Why not pick some flowers for her along the way? I'm sure they would cheer her up." The girl clapped her hands at the idea. "That's a lovely suggestion." She set her basket down and began gathering wildflowers. The wolf, of course, had no interest in flowers. He quietly slipped away, running swiftly down a shortcut that led straight to the grandmother's cottage. When he arrived, he knocked on the door and spoke in a high, sweet voice. "Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. May I come in?" The grandmother, weak in bed, called out, "Come in, my dear." The wolf rushed inside. With one quick move, he locked the grandmother safely in the closet, then pulled on her nightgown and cap. He climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up to his chin, waiting with a grin. A short while later, Little Red Riding Hood reached the cottage carrying her basket of food and flowers. She stepped inside quietly. "Grandmother, it's me. I've brought you something to eat." From the bed came a low voice. "Come closer, my dear." The girl walked toward the bed. Something felt strange. "Grandmother, what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with, my child." "And what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with, my dear." "And your hands, they're so large." "All the better to hold you with." The girl leaned in, her eyes wide with worry. "But grandmother, what sharp teeth you have." The wolf threw off the blanket and roared, "All the better to eat you with." He leapt from the bed, but before he could catch her, the door burst open. A huntsman, who had been passing by, had heard the commotion. He stormed in with his axe raised and shouted, "Stay back, you villain!" The wolf tried to escape, but the huntsman was too quick. With a loud growl, the wolf fled into the forest and was never seen in that village again. The huntsman unlocked the closet and helped grandmother out, safe and sound. Little Red Riding Hood threw her arms around her. "Oh, grandmother, I was so frightened, but I'll never forget what Mother told me. I must stay on the path and never talk to strangers." Her grandmother kissed her on the forehead. "And that, my dear, is a very wise lesson." From that day forward, Little Red Riding Hood always remembered to be careful in the forest. And though she still wore her bright red cloak, she never strayed from the path again. The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there was an old mother pig who had 3 little pigs and not enough food to feed them. So when they were old enough, she sent them out into the world to seek their fortunes. The first little pig was very lazy. He didn't want to work at all, and he built his house out of straw. The second little pig worked a little bit harder, but he was somewhat lazy too, and he built his house out of sticks. Then they sang and danced and played together the rest of the day. The third little pig worked hard all day and built his house with bricks. It was a sturdy house, complete with a fine fireplace and chimney. It looked like it could withstand the strongest winds. The next day, a wolf happened to pass by the lane where the 3 little pigs lived. And he saw the straw house, and he smelled the pig inside. He thought the pig would make a mighty fine meal, and his mouth began to water. So he knocked on the door and said, "Little pig, little pig, let me in, let me in." But the little pig saw the wolf's big paws through the keyhole, so he answered back, "No, no, no, not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin." Then the wolf showed his teeth and said, "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." So he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. The wolf opened his jaws very wide, and bit down as hard as he could, but the first little pig escaped and ran away to hide with the second little pig. The wolf continued down the lane, and he passed by the second house made of sticks. And he saw the house, and he smelled the pigs inside, and his mouth began to water, as he thought about the fine dinner they would make. So he knocked on the door and said, "Little pigs, little pigs, let me in, let me in." But the little pigs saw the wolf's pointy ears through the keyhole, so they answered back, "No, no, no, not by the hairs on our chinny chin chin." So the wolf showed his teeth and said, "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." So he huffed and he puffed, and he blew the house down. The wolf was greedy, and he tried to catch both pigs at once, but he was too greedy and got neither. His big jaws clamped down on nothing but air, and the 2 little pigs scrambled away as fast as their little hooves would carry them. The wolf chased them down the lane, and he almost caught them. But they made it to the brick house and slammed the door closed before the wolf could catch them. The 3 little pigs, they were very frightened. They knew the wolf wanted to eat them. And that was very, very true. The wolf hadn't eaten all day, and he had worked up a large appetite chasing the pigs around, and now he could smell all 3 of them inside, and he knew that the 3 little pigs would make a lovely feast. So the wolf knocked on the door and said, "Little pigs, little pigs, let me in, let me in." But the little pigs saw the wolf's narrow eyes through the keyhole, so they answered back, "No, no, no, not by the hairs on our chinny chin chin." So the wolf showed his teeth and said, "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." Well, he huffed and he puffed, he puffed and he huffed, and he huffed, huffed, and he puffed, puffed, but he could not blow the house down. At last, he was so out of breath that he couldn't huff, and he couldn't puff anymore. So he stopped to rest and thought a bit. But this was too much. The wolf danced about with rage and swore he would come down the chimney and eat up the little pig for his supper. But while he was climbing onto the roof, the little pig made up a blazing fire and put on a big pot full of water to boil. Then, just as the wolf was coming down the chimney, the little piggy pulled off the lid, And plop! In fell the wolf into the scalding water. So the little piggy put on the cover again, boiled the wolf up, and the 3 little pigs ate him for supper.
Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time in a small village, there lived a poor boy named Jack and his widowed mother. Their only possession was an old cow that no longer gave milk. One day Jack's mother sighed and said, "Jack, take the cow to the market and sell it. We need money for food." Jack tied a rope to the cow and set off. On the way, he met a strange old man. The man whispered, "I will give you 5 magic beans in exchange for your cow. Plant them overnight, and by morning they will grow into a beanstalk reaching the sky." Jack, curious and innocent, agreed. He gave away the cow and received the beans. When he returned home, he proudly showed the beans to his mother, but she was furious. "You fool! You gave away our cow for a handful of beans?" she shouted, throwing the beans out the window. Jack went to bed, sad and hungry. The next morning, Jack awoke to see something astonishing. Outside the window, a gigantic beanstalk stretched high into the clouds. Excited, Jack began to climb higher and higher until he reached a land above the clouds. There stood a huge castle. At the castle gate was a giant's wife. Jack told her he was hungry. The woman took pity and let him in. But she warned him, "Be quick, or my husband will find you." Then came a thunderous voice. "Fee, fee, fo, fum! I smell the blood of an Englishman." The giant entered, ate his meal, and then placed a bag of gold coins on the table. Soon he fell asleep. Jack crept out of hiding, snatched the bag, and hurried down the beanstalk. He and his mother were overjoyed. But Jack's curiosity was not satisfied. A few days later, he climbed again. This time he saw a magical hen that laid golden eggs. The giant roared again, "Fee, fee, fo, fum." But Jack escaped once more, carrying the hen. Now Jack and his mother were richer than ever, yet Jack still wanted more. For the 3rd time, he climbed the beanstalk. In the castle, he found a golden harp that sang on its own. But as soon as Jack grabbed it, the harp cried out, "Master, master, help!" The giant awoke in fury and chased Jack. Jack raced down the beanstalk, the giant close behind. "Mother, bring me an axe!" Jack shouted. He swung the axe and chopped the beanstalk with a crash. The giant tumbled to the ground, never to rise again. Jack and his mother lived happily with the golden hen and the magical harp. And from that day on, Jack learned to be brave, but also to be wise and grateful.
Shadow Stories in English.